They say the soil remembers. It drinks blood like water, swallows secrets and roots, and hums with the sorrow of what it's buried. Long before Albion had a name, before sword or psalm, the land had only silence, and the women who whispered to it. Ælfrun was one of them once. Before the spear, before the dreams, before her name was forgotten by the living. She died once. A quiet death, alone beneath the twisted oak in the hollow grove. And then she rose. The wind in the hollow grove did not blow like other winds. It hissed, like breath drawn through cracked teeth, low, vengeful, and ancient. Trees leaned like grieving mothers, their limbs crooked with time, their bark veined with dark sap that wept without end. Ælfrun stood at the edge of the grove, barefoot on the damp moss. The world beyond her felt impossibly distant. No birdsong, no rustle of deer, only the slow throb of silence, and something beneath it. She had no memory of walking there. Her feet were dirty, streaked with black soil. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but recognition. This place had once held her bones. A tree stood before her, twisted oak, older than scripture. Its roots bulged like knotted fists, and its trunk was split by a black hollow, wide enough for a grown woman to crawl through. It whispered, not in words, not in sound, but in pull. The air tugged at her chest like fingers through a burial shroud. And she remembered. The fever, the hunger, the flames they had set at her feet. How she screamed as the smoke filled her lungs. How they cheered, called her a witch, spat in the dirt. And yet, the tree had not let her die. A voice bloomed inside her skull like fungus. We remembered you. Now you must remember us. A crack of thunder split the sky above the grove, though there were no clouds. Ælfrun fell to her knees. Her fingers gripped the moss, and her breath came in gasps. The tree's hollow pulsed. From it, a shape began to form, not crawling, not slithering, but weaving out of shadow and bark. Something long, pale, grooved like bone. A spear. It floated in the air, hovering before her chest. The shaft was wrapped in leather that wept brine. Its tip, rusted not from water, but blood. There were carvings along its body, runes she could no longer read, though they once lived on her own tongue. Ælfrun reached out. Her hand shook. Her breath caught. Each wound must be opened. Each soul must bleed its sin. You will be our witness. You will be our wound. The spear fell into her hands with the weight of a curse. The wind died. Behind her, the path through the grove had changed. The forest bowed in strange directions, the light wrong, like lanterns under dark water. There would be no return. Not until the last name was spoken. She turned east, toward the old war path, toward the forgotten fortresses and salt-bitten graves. And the soil remembered. The land east of the grove was bitter and broken. Low hills curled like clenched fists, and the grass grew in patches of gray, as if the earth no longer remembered how to green. Ælfrun walked without rest. The Mourning Spear clung to her hand as if her bones had grown around it. It was heavier now, or maybe the memories inside it had begun to stir. On the third night, the fog came. It slid in from the riverbank, not drifting but stalking, rolling thick and low, carrying with it the sour scent of old iron and wet stone. Beneath its blanket, the shapes of the world grew soft and wrong. Trees leaned too far. Stones looked like hunchbacks. Some were distant, something breathed. She crested a ridge and saw it. A fortress, half buried, half forgotten. Stone walls split by time, gates torn from their hinges. Ravens perched on every broken tower like sentries awaiting no command. The silent fort. Once, it had been the edge of a kingdom, a last hold against the tribes of the highlands. Now it was only ruin. But something remained inside. Something the spear pulled toward like iron toward thunder. She crossed the threshold just before moonrise. The air inside the fort was thick. Still, no birds, no insects, not even the whimper of wind. Only her footsteps, echoing too long between empty walls. Her breath formed clouds in the air. Cold, too cold for early autumn. Then she saw them. Not corpses, no, but their shapes, burned into the stone. Blackened silhouettes like shadows caught in fire. One slumped against the inner gate, hands raised to shield a face. Another crouched in prayer, head bowed beneath a beam. Dozens, each one silent, and every one looking the same direction, toward the center of the courtyard. There, sunk into a shallow pit, was a well. Dry, lidless, and from its mouth rose a sound, not a scream, not a voice, but muttering. Low, overlapping whispers like prayers spoken through cracked teeth. Ælfrun stepped closer. The fog seemed to gather around her legs like eager hands. She peered into the well, and something peered back. Two white eyes. Wide. Waiting. It spoke. He begged for the sword. I gave him only memory. Do you remember your fire, witch child? Her grip tightened around the spear. It hummed. The runes along its shaft began to glow, faint red, like embers buried in ash. From the shadows, a figure climbed the wall. It moved without sound, dressed in armor that no longer fit, a knight whose skin had withered tight around bone. Its helmet clattered as it turned its head toward her, revealing a face peeled in layers, skin, flesh, then nothing. It lunged. Ælfrun did not scream. She moved. The spears sang, a deep, vibrating sound like a war cry in reverse. The tip pierced the knight's chest with a wet, crunching sound. And then, the silence shattered. The knight wept, not in voice, but in tears. Blood flowed from its eye sockets like wine from cracked urns. A voice flooded Ælfrun's mind. Not hers, not the knight's, but something before both. I only wanted to go home. But the voices in the walls, they wouldn't let me sleep. The spear drank. The runes turned black again. The figure slumped, weightless, then crumbled to dust. She stood alone. But now she could hear more. The walls of the silent fort began to whisper. The stone cried. And the soil underfoot? It laughed. Ælfrun turned her back to the well. The spear had grown heavier again. They called it the red cairn long before it bled. Long before the sky over it turned the color of old bruises. Long before the ravens refused to fly over, and the songs of children stopped mid-verse. Ælfrun had never been there in life, but her feet knew the way. It rose from the moor like a wound too proud to scab. A mound of stacked stone, crooked and black with age, its surface streaked with something that shimmered. Not moss, not water, not blood, but memory itself. As she approached, the wind changed. No longer cold, not even air. It felt like breath pressed against her ear, hot, damp, close. Do you remember your mother's voice, Ælfrun? She froze. No one had spoken her name since the flames took her. Not like that. Not like her. She cried for you. Not to save you, but to curse you for surviving. The spear grew colder in her hand. The carvings along its length were bleeding salt now, leaving streaks like tears down her arm. Children's laughter echoed across the stones. High, warbling, offbeat. Ælfrun climbed the cairn slowly, each step dragging like mud. The laughter grew louder. At the top, she saw them. 6 children, barefoot and caked in ash, sat in a circle. They were playing a game, passing bones from one hand to the next, singing a rhyme that twisted with each verse. 1 for the father lost at sea, 2 for the girl who drank the tree, 3 for the mouths that wouldn't eat, 4 for the fire beneath your feet. The 5th child turned. Its face was hers, not as she was now, but as she had been. 17. Lips cracked from prayer, eyes hollow with knowing too much, hair matted with the tears of those who said they'd help. It smiled. You died wrong, it said. You let them make it matter. She stepped back. The cairn groaned beneath her. The children stood as one. Their feet did not move. They glided forward, arms raised, teeth bared, not in hunger, but delight. Ælfrun raised the spear. Its tip flickered with a crimson heat. The figures lunged, and in one breathless moment, she drove the weapon through the chest of her younger self. No scream, only silence, and then, something worse, laughter. The figure burst into petals. Not blood, not ash, petals the color of meat. They spun around her like snow caught in firelight, singing in tiny, human voices. She's learning, they said. She's remembering. When it cleared, the cairn was empty. No children, no rhyme. Only the top stone remained, a flat slab upon which a single word had been carved. Hollow. Ælfrun descended without a word. The mourning spear pulsed against her palm. She could feel it now, not as a tool, but a mouth. It had tasted grief, and it was hungry still. In the distance, the land sloped downward, toward the marshes and the black chapel that rose from them like a broken tooth. She kept walking, and behind her, the cairn bled a slow, sweet-smelling mist. The marshes had no name. Not anymore. Old maps called them Wormfin, the serpent's breath, though no serpent had ever been seen. Only bones. Bones in spirals. Bones too large to belong to any beast the earth still claimed. Ælfrun stepped into the water without hesitation. The ground beneath her boots sloshed, then sank. Mud pulled like greedy tongues, and the fog hung low over the bog, thick enough to choke. But the spear it sang, not with sound, with pull. A pulse inside her wrist, urging her forward. Something waited ahead. Something old. Something that knew her. She reached it by dusk. A chapel, or what was left of one. Half collapsed, sunken on one side. It leaned sideways like a drunk kneeling in prayer. Its spire jutted from the swamp like a snapped limb, covered in barnacles and rot. Stone walls carved with runes long since worn to scars. A single door ajar. She pushed it open. It did not creak. It breathed. Inside, silence. No birds. No wind. No time. The altar stood in the center, surrounded by crumbled pews and candles that burned without fire. Upon the altar lay a book, bound in leather too thin, too human. She approached, each step echoing longer than the one before. The spear throbbed in her grip. The air smelled like salt, rot, and something sweet, like memories rotting in sunlight. Ælfrun opened the book. No ink, just carvings, etched deep into the pages with what looked like bone. We are not gods. We are gravity. You are not chosen. You are designed. The pages turn on their own, one after another, faster and faster, until they stopped, on a page that bore her face, drawn in lines of blood. Smiling. A whisper filled the chapel. No, not a whisper. A breath, deep and wet. From beneath the altar, she knelt. Moved by something she didn't understand, she placed the spear on the stone. It hissed. The runes flickered, then dimmed. The floor began to tremble. Stone parted. From beneath the altar, a stairway descended into darkness. She did not hesitate. Down she went, past bone-laced roots and carved skulls, past faces scratched into the walls, each weeping tears that trickled upward, not down. The deeper she went, the warmer it became. Not heat, presence, until she reached the bottom. A chamber, wide, circular, slick with condensation. At its center, a well, but not water. Ink, black, thick, and bubbling with memory. She stepped closer. The ink rose, not in splash, but in shape. A figure emerged. Too tall, limbs jointed wrong. Its face a mass of features that flickered. Mouths, eyes, hands, blending, melting, reforming. It spoke without sound. You are our echo. The blood you've spilled is ours. The grief you carry was sown in you. Ælfrun stared. Her voice, lost for years, returned in a whisper. What are you? We are what remains when gods are forgotten. We are what your kind buried beneath prayer and fire. We are the ache in your bones, the scream in the cradle, the answer that never comes. The figure reached out, not toward her, but toward the spear. She hesitated. Then it said, one more name, and the door will open. The name rose in her mind, unbidden, a name she had not thought of in years. Her mother, the last wound. She backed away. The spear shook in her hand. The figure sank, silent, but its voice followed her up the stairs, through the chapel, into the fog. You were not born. You were forged. Outside, the swamp had begun to boil. She did not look back. The final path lay ahead, southward, toward the village of Rything, where her mother's grave still stood, and where something older than blood waited for her return. Rything had not changed. It still clung to the hillside like a wound that never healed. Huts of moss-covered stone crouched beneath leafless trees. The well in the center of the square was dry, like the mouths of the dead. The wind here did not blow. It whispered names in a voice that sounded too much like home. No one greeted her. The village had long since emptied, not from war or plague, but from the quiet dread that clings to places too close to forgotten things. They didn't abandon it. They fled. And still, her mother remained. Ælfrun followed the path without thinking. Her feet carried her through the thicket at the village's edge, past the stump where the gallows once stood, past the stones still dark with memory. She stopped before the old shrine. Her mother's grave was not marked with a name, only a mirror, hung from the arch by fraying twine. Oval, ringed in rust, its glass warped and pitted with time. The air smelled of brine. She stepped closer. The spear in her hand quivered, not like metal, but like a thing trying to flee. The runes across its shaft flickered, then glowed white-hot. You don't have to look, the wind seemed to say. But you must choose. Ælfrun reached for the mirror. Her reflection did not greet her. Instead, she saw herself as a child, crouched in the dirt, hands clutched to her ears, screaming. Behind her, her mother, tall, proud, eyes filled with a fury that was never hers alone. Then, the image changed. She saw her mother bound, flames licking at her feet, the villagers shouting, praying, offering her death to silence their own shame. Ælfrun had run that day, not to save her, not to stop them. She had run because part of her believed they were right. Tears stung her eyes. She died alone. The voice in her skull whispered, "You let her burn." The spear grew heavy, so heavy it dragged her arm toward the earth. It wanted blood, one last wound, one final offering to seal the pact. All she had to do was pierce the grave. Let the spear drink the last name, Mother. Then the door would open. The knowledge would pour in. The old god would rise. She raised the weapon, paused, looked into the mirror again. And this time, it wasn't her mother she saw. It was herself. Old, hollow, eyes as black as the pit beneath the chapel. Spear fused to her spine like a root. Her voice gone. Her name forgotten. A vessel. A shell. A weapon forged by the will of something hungrier than death. She dropped the spear. It screamed. The sound split the world. Birds fell from the sky. The mirror shattered, not outward, but inward. Shards sucked into the glass like a breath drawn into drowning lungs. The earth shook. From the broken shrine, the ground split open, revealing not stone, but salt. Crystallized veins stretching into the soil like bone. And from deep within the wound, the god's voice returned. You deny your birthright. You betray your purpose. Then take this instead. Memory. Whole. Unguarded. Eternal. Ælfrun collapsed. And she remembered everything. She remembered the other girls, those taken before her, used, emptied, reshaped. She remembered the ritual, the root, the blade, the sigil carved into her heart before she ever spoke a word. She remembered that she had never been born, not truly. She was the last in a long line of hollow vessels. Not chosen, not cursed, crafted, but she also remembered her mother's final words. You are more than what they made you. When she woke, the spear was gone. The salt had turned to dust. The grave had vanished. Only the mirror frame remained, twisted like a crown of thorns. Ælfrun stood, not cleansed, not whole, but herself. And for the first time in her second life, she did not know what came next. The sky above Rhything never turned blue again. Clouds hung low like torn parchment, stained with soot and salt. Wind no longer blew across the moors, it watched. And beneath it, Ælfrun walked. Not east, not west. She followed no path. There was none left. The spear was gone, but its memory lingered, inside her bones, in the ache of her shoulder, in the pressure behind her eyes when she tried to sleep. She was no longer a weapon, but not yet human again. She wandered for days. Fields burned black greeted her with silence. Forests leaned away when she passed. Rivers dried to whispers. Somewhere along the third morning, she came upon a village, newer, untouched by the stories of Rhything or the god beneath it. Children played in the dirt. Dogs barked. Smoke curled from chimneys. They saw her coming, a stranger in a cloak made of dust and salt. Eyes sunken, skin pale, her presence wrong in a way they couldn't name. Mothers took their children inside. Doors were bolted. Prayers whispered. Ælfrun sat on the edge of the well and said nothing. She did not ask for food, or water, or shelter. She only listened. And beneath the ground, she heard it again. Not the god, not the ink, but a name, her name, spoken by mouths long dead. That night, as she lay beneath the stars, something came to her. Not a dream, not a voice, a memory, a girl, not her, bound to an altar of salt, eyes full of terror, the spear raised by another, a predecessor, the cycle repeating, and she knew the spear would return, to another, somewhere, somehow, because the wound that made it was never healed, only passed down. And she was the first to walk away. In the morning, she took the mirror frame from her cloak, the one that once hung over her mother's grave. She buried it at the edge of the village. Not to curse, not to warn, but to remember. Some say a woman with white eyes still walks the marshes of Albion. She carries no blade, no staff, no name. But where she treads, the wind grows still. The dead remain buried, and the gods below stay quiet. The Mourning Spear was never found. But sometimes, when fog rolls thick over forgotten places, people hear it. A sigh, carried on the wind. Low, grieving, ancient, like something that still remembers everything. The end of the Mourning Spear.